The dog had pressed his face into the baby's face 14 times in 2 days. On the 15th, the father finally understood what he had been trying to say. Theo Carver was a structural engineer. He solved problems with data. He made decisions based on load tolerances and material specifications, and the provable weight of things. He did not believe in coincidence, and he did not believe in intuition, and he had spent the last 48 hours watching his 4-year-old boxer Hatch behave in a way that his data-based mind could only file under one category: threat behavior. His son Emmett was 7 months old. He had been born full-term, healthy, unremarkable in all the good ways: good weight, good color, good lungs that made themselves known at full volume several times each night. Hatch had met Emmett the day they came home, had sniffed the car seat with the slow thoroughness of an animal taking a complete inventory, and had settled into a pattern of quiet proximity that Theo had found reassuring. The dog slept at the foot of the nursery door. He waited in the hallway when Theo carried Emmett to the changing table. He had never once shown aggression toward the baby, never pushed, never flinched, never claimed space the baby occupied, until the Monday after Emmett's first ear infection cleared. Emmett had been sick for 11 days, a double ear infection that had resolved with antibiotics, but left him fussier than usual, still running a low residual fever that the pediatrician had called expected. By Monday, he seemed better, more alert, eating well, taking his full bottles. Theo had told his wife Cara that the hard part was over. That afternoon, Hatch walked into the living room where Emmett was propped in his bouncer and lowered his face until his broad, wrinkled muzzle was 3 inches from Emmett's face. He pressed his nose towards the baby's mouth. Emmett startled. Hatch stayed. Emmett started to cry. Hatch pressed closer. Theo pulled him back by the collar. Hatch circled and came at the same angle again. Theo called the pediatrician. The nurse said, "It's not unusual for dogs to investigate a baby who has been sick. Watch for signs of aggression. Separate them if you're concerned." Cara came home that evening and watched it happen twice. She had her own framework. She had read 3 books on infant pet safety during pregnancy. She knew what abnormal target fixation looked like. This looked like that. "They're right," she said. "He needs to be out of the room when Emmett is awake. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one." Theo closed the baby gate across the nursery door. Hatch sat on the other side of it and did not bark. He pressed his nose to the gap at the base of the gate and stayed there for 2 hours before Theo heard him finally move away. Emmett slept well that night. He ate well the next morning. Theo felt the settled relief of a problem correctly handled. By 3 p.m., Emmett was crying again, the same low, unresolvable cry from the previous days. Theo held him, walked him, checked the temperature, 100.9. He texted the pediatrician, "Wait and watch." From behind the gate, Hatch was pressed flat to the floor, nose to the gap, doing a thing Theo had not seen him do before. A low, sustained vocalization, not a whine, not a bark, something older. Something that had no category in Theo's data-based filing system. He opened the gate. Hatch went directly to Emmett, who was in the bouncer, and pressed his nose to the baby's mouth. He held it there. He pulled back. He looked at Theo with both eyes, not the unfocused look of an anxious animal, but something aimed and specific. Theo picked Emmett up. The limpness was wrong. Not wrong enough to explain, just wrong enough to know. He drove to the ER instead of calling. Sitting in traffic, he called Cara and said the thing out loud for the first time. Something's wrong with him. Not ear infection wrong. Something else. Emmett's oxygen saturation registered at 88% when they arrived. Normal is 95 to 100. The attending physician, Dr. Sandra Wu, identified aspiration pneumonia, reflux from the recent illness, had silently entered Emmett's airway. It had been developing for days. By the time symptoms were visibly present, it had been progressing for long enough to require immediate intervention. Has your dog ever done something you couldn't explain until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. The respiratory specialist said that dogs can detect changes in breath chemistry associated with respiratory compromise. The specific volatile compound profile of an airway infection differs from a standard upper respiratory virus in ways that human senses cannot detect, but a dog's olfactory system can register clearly. Hatch had been pressing his nose to Emmett's mouth because the air coming out of it had changed. He had been doing it 14 times, because 14 times nobody had listened. Another few hours, Dr. Wu said, and we would be talking about a very different outcome. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Theo brought Emmett home 6 days later. Hatch was at the door before they reached it. Theo opened the car and let Hatch approach the carrier. The boxer pressed his nose to the mesh front of the carrier. He held it there for a long time. Then he pulled back, and his whole body exhaled at once. Theo sat down on the driveway. He was an engineer. He solved problems with data. He understood load tolerances and material specifications. He did not understand what Hatch had known for 48 hours before any doctor in any building had seen a single sign of it. He understood that he had closed a gate between his son and the only alarm that was correctly calibrated for what was actually happening. He did not get up off the driveway for a while. Hatch sat next to him, the boxer's warm, heavy side pressed against Theo's arm, waiting without impatience for the family to go inside.